Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 227 of Retropower Uncut. And we're going to start this week in the fabrication shop, as always, with the Aston Martin. And Martin, appropriately enough, has been working on this. He's also been doing lots of other stuff. I hasten to add, he hasn't only been working on this, but he's been doing started the repair work on the steel on this now, which he started with the offside A-post bottom. What we're going to do is repair the bottoms of the A and B pillars, but not reattach them to the sills, is basically the plan. So we'll repair the bases of them and leave them ready to sit onto the new sill, which will be part of the new chassis. So he's pretty much got that buttoned up on the outer part. He's still got to do the inner layer. But currently, and appropriately enough, because I know now that that Sean and Claire at ASR, I believe, watch our videos, because Claire's commented on a couple of things and offered various further repair panels for this car. Hasten to add, ASR make, as a little plug for them, they make pretty much every pressing and every section on the steel tub for these cars. Now, some of those we'll be reusing and replacing, some of those we won't, just because on some of these repairs it's going to be easier for us to do a localised repair rather than change the whole panel. And obviously a lot of the car we're not using. So, but anybody restoring one of these would do very well to speak to Claire and Sean at ASR in Irchester, ASR Motor Body Engineering. If you look them up on Google, you will find them, and yeah, they are the go-to, I would say, for parts for the body shells on these. Very experienced, know what they're doing, and make pretty much everything you're ever going to need to repair one. So, aside from that, Martin's heading down there now. He's probably about there, I would imagine. He's gone to collect the complete new nose assembly for this, which we are buying, and he's collecting a lower quarter panel repair for the aluminium part, the outer quarter panel on one side where it's beyond saving, one of them. The others we've managed to straighten out, but there was one section that was beyond saving. And also the replacement aluminium door skins for this car. Again, ASR have made us a new pair of door skins for it. We're probably going to need to talk to them about bonnet repair, but that's probably, we're going to leave that a little bit further down the line yet. We'll come back to that one. That's not urgent right now, and we're blotting that out of our minds at the minute because the bonnet's a bit of a state. But yeah, Martin's down there, he's collecting those bits, and he'll be back with them in a short while. And then he's going to carry on back on with the rot repair on this. So yeah, basically rebuilding the bottom of both A pillars, both B pillars, and then starting to work out the upper parts of the A pillars, because the inners are fairly bad on those as well, and any other metal repair needed on the steel parts of the body that we are reusing. We're going to try and get all of those done ahead of fitting to the chassis. Now obviously last week you saw the chassis CAD coming together, and that's pretty much there. There's a few tweaks still needed. We need to do a few little bits here and there on that, but it's pretty much at that point. Now, also with the Aston, I am awaiting some parts from the States. Now, unfortunately, we've had a big crossover between amazing efficiency and poor efficiency. Rock Auto, I've ordered a complete set of Corvette C7 wishbones, less the one that GM don't do anymore. There's one that is now obsolete, so I'm having to get a second-hand one. But all of the other wishbones are brand new, genuine GM, coming straight from the States via Rock Auto, and complete set of C7 wheel bearings, complete set of C7 uprights, amongst many other things, all coming from the States, or from Rock Auto. I ordered those on Tuesday last week, and a number of the parts arrived on Friday last week, which is incredible service, and that was cleared customs here, landed, customs paid, everything in 3 days. The downside is that the major parcel, the major package, these are all with FedEx, who have been very, very good with all of that, but the downside is the major parcel, which is the bulk of the parts, is stuck at FedEx depot at Stansted, which is slightly irritating because now we are on Thursday again, so we've now lost more time than it took the other parts to get here, with it just sat at Stansted Airport. So hurry up, FedEx, please get our parcel out of customs and into here. It has cleared customs apparently now, but we could really do with the parts, and it's a bit embarrassing that they've spent longer sat in the UK than it took them to get from their supplier to the UK, but here we go. So yes, general progress on a number of fronts on the Aston. You'll see things come together a bit when I can lay out some parts on the floor and display them to you, which I was hoping to do this week, but hopefully, fingers crossed, FedEx get on with it, it'll be next week. So that's where we're at on Aston. Going to move on to Saab, and as you can see, The body on that is hanging above the chassis now, above the floor pan. Bobby's pulled that off so that he can get various repair work done on the front, get all the prep work done on the rear part of the car. And very importantly, I mean, there's a number of other things going on, but I'm going to dwell on one thing because a number of people have picked it up, including the owner of the project, asking about this as well, because he follows the work in progress on this car very closely. Brief sidetrack again. We update our customers via some software called Global Workshop. I think we've covered this quite a lot on our channel before, but we use an app called Global Workshop, and all of our customers have that access to that app. And through that they have a portal to their car, to the progress being made on their car, and they can see that pretty much in real time. All of the guys in the workshop update Global Workshop pretty much continuously with photographs of their work. So they'll photograph their own work, upload to Global Workshop, and then all those photographs get put onto the correct customers' portals on Global Workshop. And then the customers can see the progress and see what's going on. So we get feedback pretty much live from our customers, even though they're on the other side of the world in a number of cases. But yes, interestingly, and back to the point I was making, one of the areas that Bobby's been working on, which is very important on this, is coatings. Because we're putting the car back together in a number of areas where we're not going to then have any access, there are internal coatings required. And a few people have brought this up. One area being, let's say, this face of the A-pillar here. This is going to be hidden at some point in the not too distant future. And the coating processes we use are kind of mixed, and they involve a little bit of care taken. For any areas at the very end, skipping straight to the very end of the project, hollow sections we will generally wax inject, and we rely on a wax coating to prevent corrosion within hollow sections. That's very necessary because unless we completely dismantle the whole body shell back to the individual pressings, which is just not feasible in most cases, then we can't coat the inside of all of those. And yes, I know about e-coating, but I have to say it doesn't generally. Most body shells air trap, unless they go down the line that they were designed to go down by the manufacturer. They generate air pockets in hollow sections and don't get full coating on internal sections on an e-coat line if the car isn't rotated in the correct way and the correct procedures aren't carried out, which the car was originally designed to go through on the original production line. So that doesn't work. So we wax inject, and that seems to hold things pretty well. You know, we've been as a business quite a number of years now. We started in 2009. We've built quite a lot of cars in that time, and they're standing up pretty well through use in general. So we're pretty happy with all that. We've learned a few lessons along the way, but we're pretty happy with that. But where we can coat inside hollow sections, where we do have pieces apart, like this A-pillar, what we will do there, and Bobby has been doing at the back of the car, is where spot welds or plug welds or puddle welds or stitch welds need to go, we will mask off. It's like where this masking line is. It's not actually, that's not the final line, it'll actually be here, but basically Bobby will mask off where the welds are going to go, and then he'll apply an epoxy, a two-part epoxy zinc-rich primer to all of the areas that are not masked off, all of the areas that will be inside the hollow section. And once that's dry, he'll then remove the masking and spray a zinc-based weld-through primer to all of the areas that were masked, which is where the welds will be going. So in between the welds, there will still be some protection. It's not amazing. Some of it gets burnt off during the weld process, but there will be some protection between those welds. Once that's done, the inside of the section that's going over that will also be coated. And again, same thing. Weld areas masked off, epoxy primer on the inside, demask, weld through primer on the masked areas, and that's what Bobby's been doing all the way down this body. And so you can see various things like bits of epoxy running out where these hollow sections have been epoxied on the inside, and then the areas that will be welded will have been masked off, and you can see on the inside face of this piece, that side of the car, that silver coating on there is the weld through primer. So Bobby's been doing that, and then he's also been preparing, as you can see on these rear blade sections, the inner arch sections and the section above them, he's been punching all of those panels ready for plug welding. So these pieces as well, lots and lots and lots of punched holes and drilled holes ready for putting plug welds in. Where we can't spot weld, we'll be puddle welding all of these sections together. So Bobby's been getting all of those bits prepared, getting the sills prepared to go on. Most of that can be spot welded, but some of that will be puddle welded as well. So he's been getting all of the areas prepared, and he's also been doing some of the welding on the rear end of the car to finalise, for one example, visible now, the fuel filler entry point in that inner wheel arch. That area there needed fully welding. He's done that. He's finalised some welding on the rear sections. He's put a pair of tubes through the back of the chassis rail so that we can get the wiring out to the light clusters from where the loom will be coming into the back of the car, and get loom access for the boot catch switch as well for the boot light, various bits and bobs there. Lots and lots and lots of finishing and planning and preparing ready for when that is attached to that and can't come off anymore. Obviously everything needs to be finished inside that ready so that there's no trapped areas, bits that can't be coated, bits that are missing, etc. So there's quite a lot of thinking ahead. So Bobby's been planning all of that and getting everything ready so that that body can go on and for the final time and stay on. Another interesting point with coatings is inside this section. This is an interesting one in that we're not going to be able to absolutely guarantee wax coverage inside this because it's a hollow section which will be inside a hollow section. So we can't guarantee wax coverage in there. So inside this we're actually going to spray, and probably have quite a lot run out the bottom, we're going to spray a generous amount of epoxy primer internally within this. So we've got a pressure pot, we'll mix the paint, put it in a pressure pot, and then we've got a 360-degree spray nozzle on a lance that we can put inside there. Like the same sort of thing you would use for applying an anti-corrosion wax. We'll poke that inside there and blast epoxy primer everywhere inside that hollow section. It'll run out, it'll look a complete mess, but Bobby will mask up the weld areas so it doesn't all get all over those. We'll put some paper on the floor, then blast that epoxy in there, let it all run out, and that'll coat everything inside there absolutely as best as we can. I'm sure at some point there will be some little patch that will get some corrosion somewhere. However, you do also have to bear in mind that as long as there's not the active elements involved in causing that corrosion available, i.e. as long as water isn't in there and a free flow of air isn't through there, then it's not going to corrode particularly quickly. So once we've got a coating in there, that lot's all capped off, and then we wax inject the whole area, the longevity should be pretty good. We're not going to be talking like 1970s car levels of corrosion, so we'll be pretty happy with the end result. So yeah, everything's coming together pretty well on this. Next week should see a fairly big step forward. There's still some work to do on the scuttle area on this. There's some rust repair on each end of that to be done. There's some finishing off on the ends of this scuttle to be done, and then the underside of that needs the rear weld flange removing. It's got to be cleaned off underneath and prepared and epoxy primed underneath that scuttle area as well, because we can't blast that once that's on, because we can't get the angle on the blast nozzle to blast under that once that's in. So we're going to prepare all that first and epoxy it so that we don't need to blast it afterwards. So that's the situation with that. And that's where we're at on Wasabi, I think. So we'll move on from that onto the E-Type. Matt is busily working on this again. He's got all the lead finished now, all the prep done. The transit coatings on the sills have been sanded off. Everything's prepared. All the body lines are cut in. The doors are gapped. Absolutely happy with all of the bodywork on that now. Really, really good gaps. Car's supported on the axle centre lines with the major weights in it, and the doors have gapped up perfectly at that. So absolutely top work by Matt on getting all of the lead marathon dealt with on that and all of the gapping done, because it's looking really, really crisp and really, really nice. He's moved on from that now onto the boot area and getting this lot sorted out, basically. This is obviously a 3D print. This will be a machined aluminium piece which houses this, a reversing camera, and a magnetic charge point, which I'm just seeing if it's lying around, but I don't think it is. Yes it is. Yes it is. Basically, these are quite a cool little. Get it correct. A magnetic charging point for a trickle charger, because obviously most of these cars that we're building for our customers are not daily use cars, and some of them will sit for quite a long period of time without being used. So it makes sense to have a very easy way of charging them, and this is a magnetically attached trickle charge point, which we've discovered and is quite a nice little thing. So we're actually mounting one of those underneath here behind the number plate. So the number plate will be going on here on a pivot mechanism, which will enable that to hinge up and give access to this. This is a locking pull, which when unlocked, will pull to release the boot lid. And then within the boot will be the remote releases for the doors. So if we have an electrical failure, we can mechanically unlock the boot, undo the boot, get in, and then mechanically release the doors. So that enables access to the car in the event of no power, which is quite important. That will be concealed by the number plate. The number plate will be on a remote lift, and when you engage reverse, that will lift to enable the reverse camera to be able to see, and so you have your reversing camera view on your rear view mirror. So that's all the plan there. So Matt has been working on getting this fitted into the rear panel. He's made a nut plate which is spot welded into the rear panel. That's mounted in there. The thing he's just doing now is putting the drains in for this seal flange. There are 2 water drains required in this because obviously this will fill with water. Matt's just been, I've never actually, this is one of those little things that's really, really obvious, but I've never done it before and I've never even thought of doing it. But he's got the car set up level and then he's got a ball bearing, he's put it in the channel, dropped it down and let it find a low point. Now it's pretty obvious and very simple, but I must admit I'd never really thought of doing it. So he's done that a few times, dropped it down both ways, let it roll, 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 and found the, and I've thrown it on the floor, and he's found the low points, which are basically there and there. Then he's averaged them out to make them symmetrical, and he's going to braze in, he'll gas braze in a pair of drain tubes from some 5/16ths, I think he's going to use 5/16ths copper or conifer line out of the bottom of that channel down, and then they're going to come in behind the trim panel under here and exit behind this number plate area here. So the drains will come out in a hidden area and can run out down there, and then they'll be brazed in there and flushed off as well. So that'll be a neat solution to getting the water out of there. So that's one of they're the number of myriad small jobs that have got to be undertaken on this, and that's what Matt's getting on with at the moment. Moving on from that, Stu is over there on the end of the bench. Stu's been doing a few jobs. I'll show you the first job he's been doing this week in a minute. The second job he's been working on this week is he's starting work on, or continuing work, he'd started before, but he's continuing work on the exhaust manifolds for the Churchill project. So he's currently making the jigs to transfer the dimensions from the original cast iron manifolds to the new stainless steel manifolds that he's making. These were actually an available item some time ago, but they're not being made anymore, so we're making something broadly similar to what was an available item some time ago. So Stu's making the jigs for those, so we'll show more next week on that. At the moment it's fairly rudimentary stuff, but once he gets into the stainless work, it'll all look a bit more exciting, so that's good. We'll come on to what he was doing, the other job that Stu's been working on in a minute. Briefly dwell on stuff here, because I've actually had like a day and a bit off this week to try and get some bits done on my own car, which I've managed to get a little bit done on, which is, well, there's 2 areas. One, altering the rear shock absorber mountings, and 2, altering the rear swing arms. There was a couple of issues with the rear swing arms. So for a couple of reasons I wasn't quite happy with them. Nothing enormous, but basically added up to the easiest solution being making some new arms. And I also decided I'd quite like to have jigs for the arms myself, so that when, because it's not an if, when I bend one of them, I can make it here myself in my own jig, then it's done. I haven't got to rely on somebody else making the arm. So I've made a jig, which is kind of on the bench here. I've made various folded parts, and machined some bosses and cut some tubes and fish mouthed them, TIG welded them all together, well, tacked them at the moment, and got the wheel back on the car and jammed some wooden blocks in it so I can roll it around. But yeah, I'm making some progress there. I've still got quite a few things to do, but yeah, basically I was doing a bit of that earlier this week, so that was on Tuesday I think it was. I just spent a bit of time on that. So that was one of my little tasks of the week that was apart from normal workshop stuff. And then we'll go this way. I'm going to pinch a little bit of Mark's slot this week, but not much. You'll still get Mark, don't worry. But I'm going to pinch a little bit of Mark's slot this week because Mark's the sheriff of this town. But I'm going to pinch a bit of this because we introduced the project last week. And I mentioned that Stu had been busy on things earlier in the week, and his job earlier in the week was making some scaffolding to hold this body shell together. So if you look inside, there's a lot of 25mm box section in there. Stu's added some mounting plates that he's welded into the shell, and then picked up on the various seat belts, the structural seat belt mountings in the car, added a few structural mounts in the back, and then added all that bolting, that scaffolding all bolts in, and enables us to put it on the rotisserie without the body shell falling in half, because it is quite broken. It's had a lot of very 1970s and 80s repair work done on it, where it was a case of, never mind the structure, just sort of perhaps bung a bit of metal and tack it in place over a rust hole and then cover it in filler. And the whole car is quite well full of that type of repair work. So prior to blasting it, we're just trying to get the filler out of the outer panels, because the outer panels, notably the wings and remains of the quarter panels, we kind of need to keep because they're not really an available part. And we'd like to keep the bulk of those and repair them, because we're probably not going to have a lot of choice, because there's not an abundance of panels available for these. Fortunately, a lot of the inner and more structural parts are available, so we are going to be having a very big shopping list of panels there. But the guys are currently trying to get the wings off, which is being hindered by the fact that they've been bodged all around. That they're getting the wings off, and then scraped off most of the filler with a hot air gun and scrapers, just trying to get the thicknesses of filler out, because if we try and blast that filler out, it'll distort the panels. Now, one could argue that perhaps that's the least of the worries with some of the panels on this, but we still don't want to ruin some of the outer panel work that is currently just about okay, or certainly some of it's reusable. We don't want to completely bend that trying to blast all the filler out of it. So they've scraped the filler out, got that cleaned up, scraped most of the underseal and remains of that type of stuff off, dug out some embarrassing amounts of fiberglass out of things like structural areas like sills and things, you know, fiberglass filler, it's structural. So dug most of that out, and yeah, getting to the point where I think we'll probably be looking at blasting this beginning of next week, probably blasting this, we're Thursday, middle of the day now, we'll probably be blasting this Monday, I think. But I think at that point, it's probably a good time to hand over to Mark. Since he's here, we'll hand over right now.
See who does all the work, can't you, eh? Look, all mucked up. All right, thanks, Nat. Bugger off. All right. No Hollywood stuff going on this week. Pure messy. As you can see, before Nat went, we had the wings on. Both off now. 10 minutes later, we're that good and quick. Nah, it's probably been an hour. As you can see, she's very poorly. But Nat's covered most of this. I've got to blast it Monday. So it'll just be a dust of rust everywhere. I'll probably want to like not be there anymore. But yeah, so let's forget about this till next week. There'll probably be about a quarter of it left when you see it next week. Let's go and have a look at the Jag. Get the lights on. Follow me, Jamie. Whoa. Bit bright in here, might need sunglasses. Woo! It's bright in here, isn't it? It's not bright than being out there. All right, so it's into polyester. Polyester is just a sprayable filler we use after we've done the light filler work. This has had 4 coats all over it. We've gone over everywhere, we've panelled it up, so everything stays together, the same amount of layers. We'll block this now, we'll start with 120. Well, first we'll guide coat all over it. Keep blocking. There's a lot of material, probably about 3/4 of this will come off. But we just want to get it on, because where it had all like the lead work and factory stuff, we've got to be able to like get it all back nice. There'll probably be some little bits, we might just have to do some dolphin glaze, but it'll be all right. So like in a minute, we'll get this out, swap it for the rust bucket, the E9, get this in there, guide coat it and start blocking it. And we'll be covered in white dust. So basically that's it this week. We've been getting this into polyester, sorting that E9 out for blasting, to get all the rubber sealer and all that off it, because blasting it won't touch rubber coating and stuff like that. So next week you'll see a lot more progress. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for that, Mark. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Cal and let him take you around the assembly shop. And we'll see you in a week's time. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nat. And I'm going to start with Interceptor. So we are starting to do some of the general assembly work on this, which is very exciting. Anybody who's built a car like this knows that this stage when it's shiny and painted and you start bolting parts on is a fantastic part of the build. Now, what's normally less fantastic is when you get near to completion and everything seems to be taking forever, all those little last bits. But at this point, we've got a pretty clear path ahead of us. So George is just making up brake lines at the minute. We've got the master cylinder loosely in. Bobby had already done provision for where all of the lines were going to be clipped, all the T-piece mountings, etc. So it's bolting things in and actually making up the hard line. So we're using ATEC steel hard line on this. In fact, it's almost all ATEC parts. So the T-pieces are little ATEC T-pieces. We're using steel hard line with ATEC stainless steel fittings on the ends of them. And yeah, it's going well. So steering rack's in as well, so we can start looking at laying out the plumbing for that. He's got those two hard lines up there which need the ends crimping there for the transmission cooler, so that's just sort of put in for the minute for retaining them there. And then he's going to start looking at fuel line routing. Anthony's just been fitting the fuel flap at the back there, which is an interesting, we'll do a little recap on this for anybody who didn't follow this build all the way through. It's actually an E30 BMW fuel flap, because the original one was some bizarre contraption that bolted in from the back of the quarter. It was completely encapsulated and had a big swinging hinge mechanism in it, and you just couldn't, there was no way we were going to get paint inside it. It was just a terrible design. So we kind of completely simplified it, made the quarter panel kind of go out wider around the fuel flap area, and did it like a BMW E30, which is a really nice design. So it's just a very small recess with a very large round hole in it, and there's a big rubber grommet that holds the neck into that round hole, which is, we've then made a custom neck off the back of that. And the flap just has the hinge pivot point extremely close to the back of the flap, so it just kind of pivots into its own recess at the front. But it means there's no hidden parts to it. You know, you take the flap out and it's just a small recess with 2 bolt holes in it, so just a much nicer solution. But yeah, cool to be on with the construction of that. Leg rows, we have just had the final piece of the puzzle to get a load of anodizing done. So the second pair of the door armrest pull handles, which have just been machined by Jonathan at PBE CNC. I wanted to check the first pair before we did the second pair because it's a fairly expensive and complicated part to machine. And he's done an incredible job. The finish is just so good on those. So that was the last piece of the puzzle for the accent colour anodizing, which is like a graphite grey colour. So we have now those armrests, we've got the kind of ashtray cubby holes that go in the gear shifter surround and the handbrake surround are in that batch, the bezels from around the instruments. What else is in there? The speaker grills, front and rear speaker grills. I think there's probably something, demist vent bezels. I think that's probably it. There's bound to be one last thing I've missed out on that. Oh, the steering wheel frame actually. And all of those bits are now going to go away for their graphite grey anodizing. And when we get that back, that opens up a lot of avenues. So the parcel shelf can go in for the final time. The door cards, yeah, they can go in for the final time actually. Speaker grills, armrests will facilitate that. We've just got to terminate the wiring for the switches in the armrests. Yeah, it just opens up loads of avenues, and that kind of hand in hand with other bits of progress we're on with will mean that this should move pretty quickly now. So Alex has now finished the rear, well, Alex and Steve have finished the rear wiring harness section. He's just terminated the front of that. So that's all in, just a few last terminations to do in situ on the back. And then the dash, we've got the last bits of work on the dash to do. I've got the HVAC unit back in there. Need to 3D print the ducts that go on there to feed the demist and face vents. As soon as that's done, that upper dash section can come out, and then Richard's going to leather that. He's already leathered the mid section, which is just resting in the footwell down there. And then that means we can get all of that dashboard in there. So then we can just finalise the lower sections of dash on this. But in the meantime, with the wiring in, we can start doing everything else. So rear seats can go in as soon as the parcel shelf's in. We can start patterning for the carpets. We can get the carpets in, and it'll kind of be a sort of gaining momentum process from there. So yeah, that's looking really good. In the engine room, Jim has been doing the strip down of the XJR6 supercharged straight 6 for the XJC project. Which he had a nasty finger or knuckle mashing moment earlier when unfortunately one of the head bolts sheared off. It was the only one, but it looks to us like it's had a head the head's been off before. It's had different head bolts put in, but we suspect that the coolant wasn't cleared out of the bolt holes before putting the head bolts back in, and they've all got corrosion on the bottom of them. So yes, one of them sheared off in fine fashion, and as it sheared off, he slammed his knuckles into I think part of the head, which probably made him swear a little bit, I would imagine. But yes, that's going to give us a little bit of a challenge getting that remaining bit of bolt out of that hole, so watch this space on that. So that's what Jim's been up to, and actually we'll quickly nip to the CAD den at this point because it just links in with XJC work, because I know that Luke has been on with quite a lot of XJC interior design.
Hi guys, and welcome to the CAD Keep for another week of updates. I think Cal literally just ended on talking about the XJC downstairs, so I'll pick up from that point. We had the client in yesterday. I'm sure Cal mentioned it, but to go over stuff like colour choice, interior colour choice, and a few little details on the car. And then he came upstairs and we did some live CADing with him, which is actually pretty fun as it turns out. Bit stressful, but pretty fun. It's not on the screen right now. But it was basically just, we're really close to the interior, but he's quite a specific guy, as he should be, spending a lot of money on the car, and he just wanted to kind of tweak some details and kind of come to a conclusion in person, so then I could take that conclusion, refine it, and then send him over some renders. So that's what I've been doing over today. We've refined that. I've done the renders. They're now in Global Workshop for the client to see, and I'm really happy with them. I think they look proper cool. And then also on the XJC, I think a few weeks ago you would have seen this. It's the boot lock. So that there forms basically the outer shape of the boot on there, and so you've got this really cool flush lock design on there. Flips up, you've got your actual lock in there. Recently, over the last couple of days, we decided that this is going to be not anodized, but actually painted along with the car, so it really does have a flush look all the way across. So I've also gone through and added all the paint gaps and then a little 90-degree on there, so that when it opens, that there will actually stop on this ledge just here, and then that means the bit that actually contacts to stop it isn't a visible part and isn't going to get chipped away and be obvious and look rather crap. So that was done, and I think that's all I've done on the XJC this week, but I've also been on with E-Type stuff, so rear lights predominantly, a little bit to do with figuring out to do with the little plate as well, which I mentioned, which has like the camera, the boot port, and the charger port on it. But other than that, mainly to do with the rear lights. You guys have seen the prototype on the car, so now we're trying to make that prototype a real thing. I ordered these LEDs, which kind of look like the ones you used to get in a kit at school, but are mega bright. So we've got a bunch of those going in the rear housing, going through a opaque lens, which kind of diffuses the light quite nicely. And then that leaves potential for some cool stuff to happen with the lights in terms of having possibilities of sequential or separating a lot easier into the indicator section, brake light section, yada yada. And then other than that, I think we've had a bunch of billet downstairs as well, which is really, really exciting. So that's all come through, test fit that. Put the magnets in the Allegro door card as well, so we could text the strip. That looks mint. I'm super happy with that. And yeah, oh yeah, whilst on Allegro as well, we've also solved now the issue of how we're going to trim the rest of the dash. So I've drawn up a panel which sits on top of that, which can be trimmed separately. That means where the edge of the 3D print on the upper dash and the bit that needs to be foamed past that meets up will be a nice, really crisp edge. And then also just some of the final bracketry, which we kind of had to wait until the point that we are now to do for everything to be in the car and to make the judgment that we need to make, really. So I think that's everything that I've done this week, the main things. So I shall hand over to George.
Okay, thank you, Luke. So this week I've been primarily, there we go, on with E-Type. So I started the week with me and Nat modifying the buck. So we've kind of changed some bits with the design of it, and long story short, we are adding the hinge mounting points to the outer skin. Originally it was going to be on the inner skin, which is why it's not in there in the first place, but we've kind of done a change of design and we're going that route. So me and Nat were modifying the actual buck, like I said, adding in some details so that we can then send it to KS. KS can then modify the mould, and then obviously we can have that made by KS, and then it will have all the mounting points on it. Moving on from that, I've been on with other bonnet E-Type related things. So I'll get Jamie to put some B-roll of kind of what I've been on with, but effectively it's figuring out the vents and the intakes for the front. It's been something which we've gone back and forth on a lot with the customer and amongst me and Cal, trying to figure out how to get enough air into the car without it looking like a Series 3 type, which, yeah, if anyone knows how they look originally, they are somewhat flawed. So we're trying to take it back to kind of its roots in terms of its elegance and looking a lot nicer. This is one of the variants. I think this is version 6. We've kind of gone through a couple of different variants. This is the one we're liking the most at the moment, which is a really simple, just round cutout, which would then feed the intakes for the engine, one for each side for one, and then that feeds up through vents into each bank of throttle bodies. And then similar to the original style in terms of the vent underneath. We've also played with some different ones which have a potential retractable lower, so then we can really kind of hide all the vents of it. But we'll see. I think visually me and Cal are most happy with this, so we're going to see what the customer says and go from there. And yeah, what else have I been doing? Some other little bits and bobs just, which aren't probably worth mentioning, or I can't mention because they're projects we don't really talk about. So yeah, thank you for that, and I'll pass back to Cal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And right, back into the thick of it again, Project Churchill. So we have been on with a couple of different avenues on this, largely plumbing related. Seems to be the order of the day this week, plumbing. So we've been looking at finalising the coolant plumbing. Stu did some mock-up hoses when we were in dry build with this, but the rad hose, the bottom rad hose, was just kind of a cobbled together. In fact, it's right here, cobbled together kind of aluminium joint with some bits of offcuts of hose on it. So we're going to make the final version of that. That's going to have a T on it, which goes to the heater connection on the bulkhead. Other connection on the back of the head goes to the bulkhead, so that's good. And then the radiator, we're just tackling a job which has been on the cards for a while, which we never sent this pattern away to have the final radiator made, because although we had a fan mounted on here, I wasn't happy. It's not as big as it could be, and at the time we used this one because it's very tight against the pulley on the water pump. And I wanted to revisit that with everything in its final position, just to make sure we couldn't get a bigger fan in there. And actually, I think we can. So I think we're going to just trial fit the same fan, SPAL fan that we've used on the Mark 1 Escorts, which will be the full width of the radiator then. I think it's going to be tight on that pulley, but looking at it earlier with a tape measure, I think it will just clear. So we've just got to be a little bit mindful. Obviously, there is engine movement to account for there as well, but I think that will be good, which means if that is good, I will revise the fan mounts to suit that, and then we can take that out. That will go to Concept Racing, and they can do the final aluminium version of that radiator. Another thing we've been looking at on this is the throttle cable, which we're hoping we can use a standard X300 left-hand drive throttle cable, because the pedal box is X300 and the engine is X300. So if anything, they're probably closer proximity-wise than they are in an X300. So that throttle cable will probably go straight in there. So yeah, that is good. Trying to think whether there was anything else on this. The other thing really was just we're gearing up to do the patterns for the glass. So the door glass and the rear quarter windows, they're flat glass, so reasonably cost effective to have made. And Stu had done some really chunky plywood patterns when we were doing the original testing and the fabrication of the frames. Really chunky ones, because we didn't want them to twist, because obviously we have had this problem before. We've done glass patterns in a slightly flexible material, and it allowed for a bit of twist we weren't aware was there. And then when we had the final glass made, obviously that doesn't twist at all, and it was a bit tight. So we made some really thick ply templates that were just machine thin on the edges, so they would go into the channel. Now we've literally got everything in its complete final guise. We're going to just repattern those glass pieces as the templates, which we'll literally give to the glass company and say, make us this glass. So the opening quarter lights will be standard shape. We'll get them made new, but we'll provide them the original glasses as a pattern, and then we'll have patterns for the other four windows. And then the front and rear screens are standard. So cast your minds way back to the metalwork. The rear window, because the cost of tooling to make curved glass is, I was going to say prohibitive, it depends on your budget of course, but it would probably cost us something like 10 grand for the back window as a custom made curved piece, but so we were keen to use the original. So it is the original glass. We just re-angled it forward, so the shape of that position it sits in is different, but it is the original glass. So yeah, that's that. And then Luke's just visiting a little technical challenge on this in the door handle actuation. We've got to make a little cranked mechanism that goes on the back of the door handles to convert the in-out motion of the push button to an up and down motion to actuate the Jag X300 door latches that we've used on this. So yeah, little bits going on behind the scenes, but yeah, all progressing it very nicely. In fact, kind of feels good progress-wise on all the projects we've got going on at the minute. On that note, we'll head down the den and see what's going on down there. Welcome back to the den, and it is a hive of activity in here. So the Fiat, which was on the ramp last week, having the running gear dropped out, is now on its trolley over here, and I think the next step on this is we're going to start stripping down the various axles and subframes so we can start doing all the bushes and the like and refinishing everything. The F-Type is just about to go, so I believe, all being well, next time we're down here, that won't be here. Skyline had its inspection last week, which it looks really quite nice, I have to say. I think it's had like an underbody restoration previously, so it looks pretty spectacular underneath. Paintwork's stunning under there. It's just a nice example. So there was a few minor things. One of the CV boots had split and sprayed a load of grease around on sort of one side of the engine, so we're replacing that. We're doing the cam belt just because it's due. One of the things, actually, probably the only scary thing we discovered on it, which was a good spot actually, was that one of the track rods was loose on the steering rack. And that's sort of the bit that's hidden by the gaiter itself, not the end. The actual where the track rod actually goes into the rack was quite a long way wound out with a lock nut not tightened up, which is definitely one of the things you don't want to find in the car. So I think that spot alone was probably worth the inspection. So that was tightened up, and actually we could tell that the tracking had previously been done without that tightened up, because the tracking, as soon as we wound that up and tightened it, the tracking was miles out, so the tracking's now been reset. Luke's also doing an oil change on it, a couple of other little minor things on it, and then we're going to be doing a underbody protection with Dynax wax on some of it, because the underbody is actually fine, but the fasteners, all the kind of nuts and bolts, all the standard components, which are mainly new components, as we know, the reason the F-Type was gone through sorting out all the factory surface finishes is that a lot of the factory plating and coating processes just aren't that good in terms of corrosion prevention. But to keep it a sort of a more sensible scope of work on this, we're just putting a protective clear film wax over all of the parts that have got that slightly iffy surface finishes on. So yeah, it's proceeding nicely. W124, we just got the cam cover back from powder coat last week, so that's now on. This I think is pretty much there. We're doing the airflow meter on it just to try and sort out a slightly iffy idle that it's got, and then we're about ready to get the interior back together. However, one thing that is an interesting request is what I have in my hand here, which is I believe a malachite ball, and the customer wants this as his shift knob, also wants to extend it to a higher position. So we have had one attempt at this already and sent this away to be diamond drilled, which did not go well. So we're going with a plan B now, I think, of machining the stick with a slight kind of flared out plinth on the top of it, and then I think we're going to essentially braid a section of this and use a structural panel bond to bond this into the top of a newly made stick. As soon as we've done that, all of the interior can go into this, which will make Richard very happy, because he's sort of at this point where he's midway through lots of different interiors, and I think he's desperate to see one of them kind of completely come together. But yeah, I'm excited as well, and I think seeing it on these Lorenzo wheels that are on it now, it looks pretty cool actually. Yeah, really excited to see that all come together. I think that is the bulk. The VR6 that was outside last week, it's just on the ramp. We're about to do the inspection on that. I think Nick had hoped to get onto that today, but the day's got away with him a bit. Mustang will be going next week. Barchetta's just awaiting a few bits. And then the MG, we got slightly held up. We got the Tremec conversion kit for that, but it didn't include the clutch slave, the concentric clutch slave. So we're just waiting for the delivery of that. I don't know why it wasn't included in the kit, but we're waiting for delivery of that, and then we can crack on with that. And in the meantime, Richard's been knuckling down to the interior work on that, which is starting to look quite good. So I'll hand over to Rich, and he can tell you a bit more about that.
How's it, everybody? Good to be back. Where did we leave off? I think, I was juggling jobs in between MGB and a little bit of Allegro. And now, today, I'm back on the W124 for a little bit. But let me start with the MGB. So, Jamie's got some shots. It's all about kick panels, door cards, and rear quarter cards. So I think Jamie's got a nice one where I've done the one side. Yes, there's some another loose one. I still need to fit that. We've obviously changed the design. Very happy with it. It looks really cool. Customer likes it. He just needs to make a decision. We got these little Morris Minor pull straps. We bought a standard set and we just de-strapped it. And I just made a little leather strap, and that's going to sit somewhere there in line with the release handle. So we just we'll send that to the client. We've sent it to the client already, and he should let us know soon whether that's a go or not, because we can either go back to the normal pull handle or a different strap perhaps. There's no wrong or right here, it's just preference really. So chuffed how that's coming along, but I will be parking all of this for a bit. I've jumped back onto the W124. Jamie's got some shots. The client, I've put the seats back in for now, and you would have seen that the console is just half put in. There's like a pink gear selector bezel in there, and that's purely because we just want to be able to get a measurement on the gear selector stick. We need to raise it a little bit, but because we've firmed up the front seats, effectively the client's going to sit a little bit higher in the car. So somebody, if it's not himself, somebody from the whole lot of us that's more or less his build and size and weight will get in the car. We'll just double check that, because he's also, I think we've mentioned this before, he's supplied us with this really cool green malachite sphere stone. Really cool. We need to somehow drill it, bond it, get it on there, and that will be the gear selector ball. So really excited for that. So we're in the mission of that. In the meantime, the guys needed to get the car just drivable. It's going to go for some exhaust work or something, I believe. So that's happening in the background. So soon this will be ready to go. So we're excited about that. What's here behind me? You'll see the famous old diamonds. I've pulled this out. I don't know if people might remember the first time we did the defined diamonds. I was sitting there cutting out all the hundreds of diamonds and sticking them, and then James said, give me a piece of foam, I'll just router it out. And to most of us amazement, he actually did it, and now is the time. So I've got a Mercedes Pagoda arriving. It's one of our existing customers that's got this car. It's purely in for trim work, so just me will be playing with it, a little bit of James, because we're going to put James's diamonds, so we're going to call them JD diamonds, to the test. So as soon as the car comes and I can rip the old covers off, I'll be able to see how this is going to react, because those in the Pagoda seats, the seat's quite buckety, it's quite round. So I've got a tiny concern where if I do this, you can see that the diamonds are closing up. Now, whether that's going to be an issue on the seat, I don't know. So again, a small little test, and we'll just rule it out, yay or nay. So I'll stitch a few with some off-cut leather, offer it up into the seat, see if it makes nasty creases, if I can pull it out, and then off we go. If not, back to the drawing board, we'll find a different cool solution, as we always do. So once that's here, that'll probably be next week sometime. So that's in the background. And that is it from me this week. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, or had a great weekend. I'll see you next week.
Right. Thank you very much, Richard, and we will see you again next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.